On Outpost Sigma-7, a joint human-Valerian mining facility on Cathara Prime, Sergeant James Chen served as security officer, coordinating safety protocols between human and Valerian workers. The partnership was barely 5 years old, formed after decades of Cold War, and cultural gaps remained vast and frequently problematic. Valerians emphasized indirect speech, layered metaphor, and careful diplomatic language. Saying exactly what you mean was considered crude in their culture. Humans, particularly working-class miners and security personnel, tended toward direct communication that Valerians found shockingly blunt. The Valerian delegation included Ambassador Seraphina Starweave, whose role involved maintaining the partnership and navigating constant cultural friction. During a diplomatic reception celebrating the 5th anniversary of the mining partnership, James found himself in conversation with Ambassador Seraphina after several drinks he didn't realize were significantly more potent than human alcohol. The conversation was going well by his standards, discussing mining efficiency, safety protocols. Seraphina was wearing traditional Valerian formal attire, elaborate and striking, and James, with inhibitions lowered by alien alcohol he'd underestimated, made what he thought was a straightforward compliment. What he intended as appreciation came out as, "You speak with such precision about these technical matters, and your presentation is very striking. Your breasts are very nice." The moment the words left his mouth, James's alcohol-fogged brain realized he just made a catastrophically inappropriate comment to a senior alien diplomat during a formal reception. The reception went quiet around them. Other attendees clearly heard and were watching to see how Ambassador Seraphina responded to this shocking breach of protocol. James braced for the diplomatic incident he just created, expected outrage, formal complaint, possibly charges ending his career and damaging the already fragile partnership. But Seraphina's reaction was not what anyone expected. Instead of cold fury that Valerian protocols would typically demand, she smiled, genuine amusement, and her response carried warmth rather than offense. "You speak very boldly for a human, Sergeant Chen. In Valerian culture, such direct commentary about physical appearance would typically be considered offensively crude. But I find your honesty refreshing and brave. Most humans who work with us learn to speak in careful circles, to bury their actual thoughts under layers of diplomatic language. You just said exactly what you were thinking, without calculation or pretense. That is either very foolish or very courageous, and I am inclined to interpret it as the latter." She paused, speaking quietly enough that only James could hear. "Also, thank you. Compliments delivered with such transparent sincerity are rare, even if your phrasing was spectacularly inappropriate by any diplomatic standard." James, still processing that he somehow didn't just end his career, managed. "I apologize, Ambassador. That was completely inappropriate, and I have no excuse except that I underestimated the strength of Valerian ceremonial wine and lost control of my verbal filters. I meant no disrespect." Seraphina's laugh was unexpected. "Sergeant Chen, if you had meant disrespect, you would have phrased it very differently. What you delivered was clumsy honesty, not calculated insult. I accept your apology for the impropriety, but I am not offended by the sentiment. In fact, your boldness has made this reception significantly more interesting than the carefully scripted diplomatic platitudes I have been enduring for 3 hours." The conversation continued with different energy, Seraphina asking about human communication styles and why they favor directness over diplomatic indirection. What should have been career-ending instead became the beginning of unlikely connection. Over following weeks, Ambassador Seraphina sought out James's company more frequently than professional coordination required, requesting his presence at meetings, asking his perspective on human cultural practices. James, initially convinced this was Seraphina monitoring him to prevent another catastrophic comment, gradually realized she was genuinely interested in his perspective, that his blunt honesty, while inappropriate by Valerian standards, provided insights into human thinking that careful diplomatic language obscured. Their conversations ranged from professional coordination to philosophical discussions about communication and honesty. James learned that Seraphina's role required constant performance of diplomatic protocols she sometimes found exhausting, that maintaining careful indirection meant she rarely got to simply say what she thought. Seraphina discovered that James's directness wasn't rudeness, it's how humans show trust, that saying exactly what you mean is considered honest rather than crude in his culture. The Outpost personnel noticed the developing connection. Some assumed Seraphina was collecting intelligence. Some believed she was conducting cultural research. A few recognized what was actually developing, but weren't sure what to make of cross-species relationship between security sergeant and senior ambassador. The situation complicated when political tensions rose over resource distribution rights. Hardliners on both sides were looking for reasons to abandon the partnership, and any scandal involving inappropriate relationships could provide the excuse they needed. The crisis point came when a mining accident required immediate coordination between rescue teams. James coordinated human response while Seraphina managed Valerian resources, and 18 hours of crisis demonstrated the effectiveness of their partnership. They communicated with directness that sped decision-making. Their mutual understanding allowed effective coordination, and their combined efforts saved lives. But the success made their personal connection more visible to those watching for problems. Conservative factions filed formal complaints. Humans argued Seraphina was manipulating James through inappropriate relationship. Valerians argued James's crude influence was corrupting a respected ambassador. Both demanded investigation and separation. Faced with formal pressure to end their association, they decided whether to comply with cultural expectations or defend the relationship they'd built. Seraphina addressed both leaderships in a joint session, speaking with direct honesty that shocked her own people. Sergeant Chen made a spectacularly inappropriate comment to me months ago, speaking with boldness that violated every diplomatic protocol. I could have responded with offense. Instead, I recognized his words for what they were: clumsy but sincere honesty from someone whose culture values directness. That moment began a friendship that has made me more effective as ambassador, because I learned to understand human directness rather than just being offended by it. James added, I said something stupid because I was drunk on wine I didn't know was strong. Ambassador Seraphina responded with grace and humor instead of the offense I deserved. What followed has taught me more about Valerian culture than any training manual. If valuing that makes me inappropriate, then I'm guilty as charged. The political outcome was messy. Both were formally reprimanded for inappropriate familiarity. Both received warnings about boundaries, but neither faced severe punishment. The mining partnership continued, strengthened by evidence that cooperation can be effective even when individuals violate some protocols. Months later, at another reception, someone commented they worked together remarkably well despite cultural differences. Seraphina's response carried warmth of genuine friendship. Sergeant Chen once made the most inappropriately direct comment I have ever received. It was crude, it was clumsy, and it was absolutely sincere. That boldness, that willingness to say what he actually thought rather than what diplomacy demanded, showed me that sometimes the most valuable communication is the kind that violates every protocol. We work well together because we both learned that honesty, even when inappropriate, can be more valuable than perfect diplomatic performance. James added, I said something spectacularly stupid, and somehow didn't end my career because Ambassador Seraphina chose to interpret my boldness as courage rather than disrespect. That taught me that the best partnerships aren't built on perfect protocol. They're built on willingness to be honest even when it's awkward, and willingness to